The punch
Enjoy
was
the
supposed to be
show,
for
everyone.
toasting. Instead, my husband used it to
It
baptize me
appears
into
our guest of honor
humiliation
has had a
while
slight
1,000
mishap.
people watched and laughed. But here is what Marcus Drake did not know. He did not know that my 3 billionaire brothers were watching everything through a
It's
live
all right,
stream.
Izzy.
He did not
We're
know
here
that the
for you
woman he had
now.
been hiding in Miami for 8 years was
Everything
about
is
to
gonna
become
be
my
okay.
greatest ally. He did not know that his own mother had been keeping 20 years of evidence, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. And he definitely did not know that the pregnant wife he had just destroyed in front of Chicago's elite was about to rise from the ashes and burn his entire empire to the ground.
Right here.
This is not just a
It says
story
they
about
start
betrayal.
smiling around 6 weeks.
This is a story about a
Oh,
woman
that
who
explains
lost
why she's
everything.
so happy today.
Her husband, her dignity, her newborn daughter, and fought her way back from rock bottom. If you have ever been underestimated, manipulated, or made to feel worthless by someone who claimed to love you, this story is for you. Stay until the end, because the moment Marcus Drake realizes he has made the biggest mistake of his life is something you don't want to miss. Let us begin. The punch was supposed to be for toasting. Instead, my husband used it to baptize me into humiliation while 1,000 people watched and laughed. I remember every detail of that night with perfect, painful clarity. The way the crystal chandeliers caught the light in the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom, the string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner, the ice sculptures shaped like swans, slowly melting as Chicago's elite mingled beneath them. I was wearing a champagne-colored gown that I had spent 3 weeks choosing. It draped perfectly over my 6-month pregnant belly, and when I looked in the mirror that evening, I thought I had never looked more beautiful, more hopeful. It was our 5th wedding anniversary, and I had planned every detail of this party myself. 1,000 guests, the finest catering, a celebration of the life Marcus Drake and I had built together. I was such a fool. The first sign that something was wrong came when I spotted Scarlett Hayes across the ballroom. She was wearing red, of course. She always wore red. Marcus said she was just a business associate, someone he worked with on real estate deals. But the way she looked at him made my stomach tighten in ways that had nothing to do with the baby. I pushed the feeling aside. I had been doing that a lot lately. Pushing aside the late nights Marcus claimed were work emergencies. Pushing aside the phone calls he took in other rooms. Pushing aside the way he flinched when I touched him unexpectedly. Tonight was supposed to fix everything. Tonight, surrounded by friends and colleagues, Marcus would remember why he married me, why he loved me. He took the microphone at exactly 9:15. I remember because I checked my watch, wondering if I should signal the caterers to bring out the anniversary cake. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice smooth and confident as always. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate 5 years of marriage." The crowd applauded. I smiled, my hand resting on my belly where our daughter kicked in response to the noise. 5 years ago, Marcus continued, I made a decision that changed my life. I married Isabella Harrington. More applause. I felt tears prick my eyes. Maybe I had been wrong to worry. Maybe everything was going to be fine. But I have a confession to make. The room grew quiet. I saw people lean forward. Champagne glasses paused halfway to their lips. For the past 5 years, I've been living a lie. My smile froze. Around me, I could feel the energy in the room shift. People were pulling out their phones, recording. "Isabella," Marcus said, finally looking directly at me, "you were never anything more than a stepping stone, a convenient connection to respectability while I built my empire. I could not breathe, could not move, could not do anything but stand there as my husband systematically destroyed me in front of everyone we knew. But tonight, I am done pretending." Marcus extended his hand toward the crowd, and Scarlett Hayes stepped forward, her red dress catching the light like fresh blood. "This woman is my future." Isabella was just research. The whispers started. The recording lights on phones glowed like accusatory eyes. I finally found my voice. "Marcus, please. We have a baby coming. I am your wife." He laughed. The sound was sharp and cruel, echoing off marble floors that suddenly felt like they were tilting beneath my feet. "You were a stepping stone, Isabella. You made it pathetically easy, actually. So desperate to rebel against your brothers, so eager to prove you could make it on your own. All I had to do was tell you what you wanted to hear." Scarlett was climbing the stairs to the stage now, her heels clicking against the marble with each step. In her hands, she carried a crystal punch bowl filled with bright red liquid. I knew what was about to happen. Some part of me knew, but I could not make my legs move, could not make my voice work. I just stood there, my hands wrapped protectively around my pregnant belly, as my entire world collapsed. "Do it, Scarlett," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. "Empty the whole thing on her head. Show everyone here who truly deserves to stand beside me." The punch was ice cold. It crashed over my head like a waterfall, soaking through my carefully styled hair, streaming down my face, drenching the gown I had been so proud of just an hour ago. The cold shocked my skin, made my baby kick hard against my ribs, as if she was protesting the cruelty being inflicted on her mother. I stood there, dripping, shaking, as 1,000 people either laughed or looked away in shame. Not one person moved to help me. Not one voice rose in my defense. I was utterly, completely alone. "Look at her," Scarlett cooed, running her fingers through Marcus's hair like I was invisible. "So pathetic. Did you really think a man like Marcus would stay with someone so ordinary? Someone who brought nothing but neediness and tears?" Through the punch dripping into my eyes, I caught my reflection in a champagne bucket on the nearest table. Mascara running, hair plastered to my skull. The woman staring back at me was broken, and in that moment, I thought of my brothers, Aiden, Grayson, and Miles. The three men who had raised me after our parents died. The three men who had warned me about Marcus before my wedding. The three men I had screamed at and cut out of my life because I was so sure they were wrong. They had tried to tell me Aiden had found financial irregularities in Marcus's business dealings. Grayson had questioned his motives. Miles had begged me to slow down, to think. And I had accused them of trying to control me. I had eloped without telling them. I had changed my number, blocked their emails, refused their calls. For 5 years, I had been building a life with Marcus, convinced I was proving my independence, proving I did not need the Harrington name or money or protection. Now I stood soaked in punch at my own anniversary party, realizing I had traded 3 brothers who loved me unconditionally for a husband who had never loved me at all. "Marcus, please." I tried one more time, my voice barely above a whisper. "Remember when we first met? You said I saved you. You said you would never hurt me." "I lied," Marcus said simply. And the casual way he admitted it made several guests gasp audibly. I said what I needed to say to get what I wanted, and what I wanted was access to the Harrington network. Scarlett laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "She actually thought you loved her. How adorable." My legs were trembling so badly I thought I might collapse. The ballroom was spinning. Everything I had believed about my life, my marriage, my husband was a lie. And I had no one to blame but myself. "Security," Marcus called out, snapping his fingers like he was summoning a waiter. "Make sure my wife does not leave until everyone has had a chance to see her properly." I want this moment documented. 2 large men in black suits stepped forward, positioning themselves between me and the exit. I was trapped, humiliated, alone. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered the words I had refused to hear for 5 years. "Your brothers were right about him. They were right about everything." I do not know how long I stood there. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. Time had lost all meaning in that ballroom of horrors. People were laughing, taking photos. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight from foot to foot. But no one stepped forward to help. No one wanted to cross Marcus Drake, the man who had built a real estate empire and cultivated friendships with half of Chicago's power brokers. I was just his pathetic, pregnant, punch-soaked wife, not worth the risk. And maybe that was the cruelest part. Not the punch, not Marcus's words, but the 1,000 people who watched it happen and decided I was not worth saving. I want you to remember that feeling. The feeling of being surrounded by people and completely alone. Because if you have ever felt it, you know it never fully goes away. It was a stranger who finally broke through my paralysis. A woman I had never seen before, maybe 50 years old with kind eyes and silver streaks in her hair. She walked past me like she was heading somewhere else. But as she passed, she pressed a cloth napkin into my trembling hand. "I have been there," she whispered, so quietly no one else could hear. "Get out. Now, do not look back." Those words cracked something open inside me. I was not completely alone. Someone saw me. Someone cared. A stranger with kind eyes had recognized the look on my face because she had worn it herself once. Wherever you are, whoever you are, thank you. You saved my life that night. I started moving, one foot in front of the other. The security guards shifted, preparing to block me, but I was not heading for the main doors. I was heading for the service entrance near the kitchen, the one I had used earlier when checking on the catering. "Mrs. Drake," one of the guards called. Mr. Drake said you need to stay. But I was already pushing through the kitchen doors, past startled waiters and confused cooks who looked at my punch-soaked dress and then quickly looked away. Out into the back hallway that led to the parking garage. My heels clicked against the concrete. Each step felt like running through water. Behind me, I could hear the guard talking into his radio, reporting my escape like I was a prisoner instead of a wife. I made it halfway to my car before I realized the trap. My keys were gone. Marcus must have taken them from my purse while I was distracted greeting guests. I remembered now. He had offered to hold my clutch while I hugged an old friend. So thoughtful, so considerate, so calculated. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Marcus had mentioned installing some kind of security system in the hotel for the event. He said it was for privacy, to prevent anyone from recording our special night. I had thought he was being protective. Now I understood it was a cage. My credit cards would not work either. I tried them at the parking garage payment kiosk with shaking hands. Declined, declined, declined. The machine beeped each time like it was mocking me. Marcus had been planning this. Every detail, every contingency. He wanted me broken and helpless, with nowhere to run and no one to call. He had spent months, maybe years, preparing for this moment. And I had been so blind, so in love, that I had never seen it coming. I had $23 in POW, a frozen phone, no car keys, and a baby kicking frantically in my belly, responding to my skyrocketing heart rate. I sank down onto the cold concrete floor of the parking garage, my ruined dress pooling around me like spilled champagne. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable, mixing with the punch still dripping from my hair. My mascara was running. I could feel it streaking down my cheeks. I probably looked like a horror movie victim. Maybe I was one. I could call my brothers. The thought floated up from somewhere deep inside, from the part of me that still remembered being 7 years old and safe in Aiden's arms. There was a payphone near the garage attendant booth. I still remembered his number by heart. I had memorized it when I was 7 years old, right after our parents died, because Aiden made me repeat it every night until I could say it in my sleep. But how could I face them after everything I said, after I screamed at Aiden that he wanted to control me, after I told Grayson he was just jealous of my happiness, after I hung up on Miles when he tried to warn me one last time? I had said such terrible things, things designed to wound, things I could never take back. If you cannot be happy for me, then I do not need you at my wedding. Those were my last words to Aiden, 5 years ago. And now here I sat, covered in punch and humiliation, needing him more than I had ever needed anyone. They had been right. They had been right about everything. And I had been so blind, so desperate to prove my independence, that I had walked straight into Marcus's trap and slammed the door behind me. No, I could not call them. Not like this. Not covered in punch and shame. There was only one person left who might still answer. One friend Marcus had never managed to completely cut me off from, because she lived across the country and only visited once a year, Sophie Bennett. We had been roommates in college. She was the kind of friend who remembered birthdays, sent care packages, and never judged. Marcus had called her clingy and needy and suggested I limit contact. Like an idiot, I had listened. But Sophie had never stopped reaching out. A text here, an email there, a birthday card every single year with a handwritten note that always said the same thing. I am here when you are ready. She was in Chicago this week for a conference. She had asked to meet for coffee, and I had said I was too busy with the party. The payphone took quarters. I had 3 of them in the bottom of my clutch, mixed in with breath mints and a lipstick I would never use again. My fingers were shaking so badly I dropped the first quarter twice before getting it into the slot. "Please answer," I whispered as the phone rang. "Please, please answer." "Hello?" Sophie's voice was confused. She would not have recognized the number. Sophie, it is Isabella. I need help. There was a beat of silence. One heartbeat. Two. I stopped breathing. Then, without hesitation, without questions, without a single word of judgment, Sophie said the words that saved my life. Where are you? I'm coming right now. She arrived in 15 minutes. I do not know how she got there so fast. Maybe she broke every traffic law in Chicago. Maybe there was a God after all, and he decided I had suffered enough for one night. Sophie took one look at me, at my ruined dress and my mascara-streaked face and my swollen eyes, and her expression went through about 17 emotions in 2 seconds. But she did not waste time with questions. She helped me to my feet, wrapped her coat around my shaking shoulders, and guided me to her rental car. She did not say I told you so. She did not say what happened. She did not say anything until we were driving, putting distance between me and that hotel of horrors. Then she finally spoke. I have been waiting for this call for 5 years, Sophie said quietly, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I have been waiting for you to be ready to see the truth about him. I stared at her. What? Isabella, I've been documenting Marcus's behavior since your second anniversary. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. The way he isolated you from your friends, the way he controlled your finances, the way he made you feel crazy for questioning him. I saw it all. You knew? All this time you knew what he was? I suspected, but you were not ready to hear it. She finally glanced at me, and I saw tears in her own eyes. I am so sorry, Bella. I should have tried harder. I should have found a way to make you see. I shook my head. I would not have listened. I was so determined to prove that my brothers were wrong, that I could handle my own life. I would have just pushed you away like I pushed away everyone else. Sophie pulled into the parking lot of her hotel. Let us get you cleaned up, and then we need to talk about what happens next. What happens next is I file for divorce, I said, the words feeling strange and heavy in my mouth. I take him for everything he has. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that chilled me to the bone. Isabella, I do not think Marcus is going to let you go that easily. Tonight was not just humiliation. It was strategy. He is building a narrative. The unstable wife. The irrational pregnant woman. She turned to look at me with an expression that made my stomach drop. Whatever he is planning, tonight was just the beginning. She was right. I knew she was right. But in that moment, sitting in a hotel parking lot in a ruined dress with punch drying in my hair, I could not think about strategy. I could only think about survival. One step at a time, Sophie said gently. First we get you safe, then we get you help. And then, Isabella Harrington, we figure out how to take down the man who thought he could destroy you. She called me by my maiden name, not Drake, Harrington. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt like maybe that woman still existed somewhere inside me, buried under years of manipulation and self-doubt, but still there, still fighting. I woke up the next morning in Sophie's hotel room, disoriented and aching in places I did not know could ache. For one blissful moment, I did not remember. The sheets were soft. The pillow smelled like lavender. I was safe. Then it all came flooding back, a tsunami of humiliation and betrayal that made me want to pull the covers over my head and never emerge. The punch, the laughter, Marcus's face as he watched me drown in front of everyone we knew. My phone was charging on the nightstand. Sophie had managed to get it working again once we were away from the hotel and Marcus's signal blocker. There were 247 notifications waiting for me. The video had gone viral. I should not have looked. I knew I should not have looked, but I could not stop myself. There I was, in high definition, standing frozen as punch cascaded over my head. The video had been edited with slow motion effects. Someone had added laughing emojis. It had been shared 400,000 times. I scrolled through comments with numbing fingers. Some were sympathetic. Poor woman, what kind of monster does that to his pregnant wife? But most were cruel in the way only anonymous strangers can be. Gold digger got what she deserved. Look at her just standing there taking it. Pathetic. No wonder he cheated. Her brothers are billionaires. This is probably staged for attention. Rich people drama, Harrington family drama. Must be nice to have money to fall back on when your fake marriage fails. She looks fat. The baby's probably not even his. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, but it did not break. Of course it did not break. Nothing was going the way I wanted it to. The last comment stung the most because it forced me to confront the question I had been avoiding since I fled that parking garage. My brothers. I had not spoken to them in 5 years. The last words I had said to Aiden were ugly, cruel things designed to wound as deeply as possible. I had accused him of being controlling, of trying to ruin my happiness because he could not accept that I had found love outside our family's protective bubble. At my engagement party, after Aiden publicly questioned Marcus's business ethics, I had made a choice that still haunted me in my nightmares. If you cannot be happy for me, then I do not need you at my wedding. I can still see his face, the way it crumpled for just a second before he pulled his mask back on, the way Grayson had to physically hold Miles back, the way all three of them watched me walk away like I was walking off a cliff, which I suppose I was. I had eloped 3 weeks later, changed my number, blocked every method of contact, returned their letters unopened. I had been so sure I was proving my independence, my strength. Now I understood I had been proving only my stupidity. Sophie came out of the bathroom already dressed. She took one look at my face and then at the phone on the floor. "You read the comments," she said. "It was not a question. I am pathetic. You are human." She sat on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I want to die," I said honestly. The words came out before I could stop them. "But I cannot because I have a baby to think about." Sophie did not flinch. She did not lecture me about being dramatic. She just nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. "Have you thought about calling Aiden?" she asked. "I cannot." "Isabella, I said horrible things, Sophie, things I can never take back. And they were right about Marcus. They tried to warn me, and I threw it in their faces." I pulled my knees up to my chest, which was awkward with my pregnant belly. How can I crawl back now? How can I look them in the eye and admit that I was wrong about everything? Sophie was quiet for a long moment. I thought she was going to give me a speech about pride and forgiveness. Instead, she pulled out her own phone and handed it to me. On the screen was a text conversation with Aiden Harrington. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went cold. "You have been talking to my brother? He reached out to me after you stopped responding to their calls." She did not look apologetic. "They asked me to keep an eye on you, to let them know if you were ever in trouble. I have been sending updates every few months for the past 4 years. I did not know whether to feel betrayed or grateful. Both emotions warred inside me, making my head spin. You spied on me? I watched over you," Sophie corrected gently, "because your brothers love you too much to let you disappear completely, even when you made it clear you wanted nothing to do with them. They know about Marcus, about the party. They know everything." Sophie's voice was soft. "They have known something was wrong for years, Bella. Aiden has had investigators looking into Marcus since before you got married. They have been waiting for you to be ready to come home." The tears came again. I seemed to have an endless supply of them, an ocean of grief and regret that had been building for 5 years. I screamed at Aiden that he wanted to control my life. I told Grayson he was jealous because no one would ever love him the way Marcus loved me. I said the most terrible things I could think of, just to hurt them. I was sobbing now, ugly crying in a way I had not done since our parents' funeral. "And now you are telling me they have been watching over me this whole time? Family does not stop loving you just because you say mean things." Sophie handed me a tissue. "Call him, Isabella. The worst that can happen is he says he told you so, but I do not think that is what will happen. What if he does not answer?" "He will answer," Sophie said with a certainty that made me wonder how well she really knew my brother. "He has been waiting 5 years for this call." My hands shook as I took Sophie's phone. The number was already pulled up. All I had to do was press call. I thought about my baby, my daughter who would be born in 3 months into a world where her father had publicly humiliated her mother, where her family was shattered before she even took her first breath. Did I have the right to let my pride deprive her of uncles who might love her? A family who might protect her when I could not protect myself? My mother's voice echoed in my memory, something she had said when I was very young. before the car accident that took her and my father away. Pride is a poor substitute for family, Isabella. It cannot hold you when you cry. It cannot celebrate when you succeed. And it cannot carry you when you fall. I pressed call. It rang once. My heart stopped. Twice. I forgot how to breathe. 3 times. I was about to hang up, convinced I had made a mistake, when the line clicked. Bella? Just my name. That was all he said. No anger. No, I told you so. No lecture about my choices. Just my childhood nickname, spoken in the voice of the brother who had raised me after our parents died. The same voice that had read me bedtime stories. The same voice that had talked me through my first heartbreak. The same voice that had given the toast at my high school graduation, telling everyone that our parents would be proud. I broke. Aiden, I am so sorry. The words tumbled out between sobs, an avalanche of 5 years of regret. You were right about everything, about Marcus, about all of it. And I am so sorry. Where are you? His voice was steady, calm. Are you safe? Not what happened. Not what do you need, just are you safe? That question broke me all over again. I am at Sophie's hotel, I managed. Do not move. We are on our way. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand. We, Sophie said quietly, a small smile on her face. Not I, we. All 3 of them are coming. 40 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Sophie answered it, and suddenly her small hotel room was full of Harrington brothers. Aiden came through first. He was 42 now, graying at the temples, but still built like he could take on the world and win. He had the same eyes as our father. I had forgotten that. Or maybe I had forced myself to forget. Grayson followed, quieter, more controlled, the numbers man who had always been able to see through anyone's lies. Except apparently mine. Miles came last, phone in hand as always, but for once he was not looking at the screen. He was looking at me with an expression that made my chest ache. I stood up from the bed, still wearing Sophie's borrowed clothes, my hair a tangled mess, my eyes swollen from crying. I must have looked like a disaster. I certainly felt like one. I opened my mouth to apologize again, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. Aiden crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped me in his arms. He did not say anything. He just held me while I cried into his chest, the same way he had held me when I was 7 years old and our parents did not come home from their business trip. The same way he had held me at their funeral when I did not understand why everyone was so sad. The same way he had held me through every nightmare and every scraped knee and every broken heart. I had forgotten what it felt like to be held by someone who loved me unconditionally. Marcus's hugs had always felt like transactions. Aiden's felt like home. Grayson appeared beside us, draping a blanket around my shoulders without a word. Miles was on his phone ordering food because he knew I probably had not eaten. Even now, even after everything, they were taking care of me. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was my ragged breathing as 5 years of silence and regret poured out of me. Finally, Aiden pulled back. He examined my face, my swollen eyes, the bruise on my wrist where I had fallen at the party. We do not need your apology, he said softly. We need you to know that we never stopped loving you. Not for one single second of the past 5 years. Why, I whispered. After everything I said, everything I did. Because you are our sister. Grayson's voice was rough with emotion he was trying to hide. And family does not give up on each other. Even when they make mistakes, even really big mistakes, Miles added, trying for his usual humor but falling short. Even catastrophically enormous mistakes involving a guy we literally told you was a con artist. Aiden shot him a warning look, but I laughed through my tears. The first genuine laugh in longer than I could remember. You did tell me, I admitted. You all told me, and I was too stubborn and too proud to listen. That is what Harringtons do, Miles said with a shrug. We are stubborn. It is genetic. You come by it honestly. Aiden guided me back to sit on the bed. Now, tell us everything, from the beginning. So I did. I told them about the party, the humiliation, the punch. I told them about the frozen credit cards and disabled phone. I told them about Marcus's words, his casual admission that he had never loved me, that I had been nothing but a stepping stone to connections and wealth. And as I talked, I watched their faces shift from concern to cold, calculated fury. By the time I finished, all three of my brothers had the same expression. It was the expression that had made the Harrington name feared in boardrooms across the country, the expression of men who had destroyed companies, ended careers, and built an empire on the ruins of their enemies. It was the expression of men who were about to destroy someone. "Here is what is going to happen," Aiden said, his voice calm in a way that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "Our legal team is standing by. Investigators are ready. Forensic accountants are on call. We have a media strategy prepared and a safe house available. By tomorrow morning, Marcus Drake will wish he had never heard the name Harrington." I should have felt relieved. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I heard myself say no. All three of my brothers stared at me like I had grown a second head. "No," Aiden repeated. "Isabella, did you hear what I just said? We can end Marcus by morning, I know, and I appreciate it more than I can say. But I cannot let you do that." "Why the hell not?" Miles demanded, throwing his hands up. "Because if you do this for me, I am still just someone who needed saving." I met Aiden's eyes, holding his gaze even though part of me wanted to look away. I am still the girl who cannot handle her own life. The little sister who ran away from the family and had to be rescued when everything fell apart. "This is not about pride," Grayson said. "Marcus is dangerous. I know he is. But I spent 5 years letting him make every decision for me. I spent 5 years being controlled, manipulated, told what to think and who to trust." I took a deep breath. "If I let you swoop in and fix everything, how is that any different? I would just be trading one set of people making decisions for me for another." "We would never," Aiden started. I know you would never treat me the way Marcus did, but I need to do this myself, or at least I need to be the one driving. Let me tell you something I have learned. When you spend years letting someone else control your life, you forget who you are. You forget that you have a voice. You forget that your opinions matter. And the only way to remember is to start making your own choices again, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones. The brothers exchanged looks. I could see them communicating in that silent way they had developed over decades of running a business empire together. Raised eyebrows, slight nods, a language only they understood. Finally, Aiden spoke. "What exactly are you proposing?" I thought about it. My mind was clearer than it had been in years, as if the punch bowl had washed away not just my dignity, but also the fog Marcus had kept me in. "You provide resources," I said slowly, "but I make the decisions. Legal connections, but I hire the lawyer. Investigation findings, but I decide what to do with them. Money for basic needs while I get on my feet, but I build my own case." "That could take months," Grayson warned. "Years even. Marcus has had a long time to prepare for this. Then it takes months." I put my hand on my belly, where my daughter was kicking like she was cheering me on. "I need to know I can protect her myself. I need to know that when she grows up and asks how her mother survived, I can tell her that I fought my own battles." Aiden ran a hand through his hair. This was clearly not the response he had expected. "Marcus is not just a cheater, Bella. We found things. Bad things. If you do this your way, it will be harder, longer, more painful." "Good," I said. "I need to feel it. I need to know I survived it myself." Another long silence. Another round of silent communication between my brothers. Finally, Miles sighed. "She is definitely a Harrington, stubborn as a mule. Takes one to know one," Grayson muttered. "Pot, meet kettle," I added, and for a moment it felt like old times. Before Marcus, before everything went wrong. Aiden was still studying me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Fine. We do it your way. But I have conditions," I nodded. "First, you accept the safe house. Marcus knows where you live, and you are not going back there. Second, you let us put a security detail on you, non-negotiable. Third, you check in with us every single day. If you miss a check-in, we are coming for you whether you like it or not." Those terms seemed reasonable. Agreed. "And fourth," Aiden leaned forward, "if at any point you decide you are ready for us to step in, you tell us. No shame, no pride, just practicality. Sometimes the smart move is accepting help." I thought about the woman in the ballroom who had handed me the napkin. I have been there. Get out. She had needed help to survive. There was no shame in that. "Agreed," I said. "But I hope I will not need to ask." "We hope so too," Miles said. "But we will be ready anyway, like attack dogs waiting for the signal." Very comforting image, I said dryly. I thought so. It was not the reconciliation I had imagined during those rare moments over the past 5 years when I had let myself think about my brothers. There were no grand apologies, no tearful promises, no immediate return to the closeness we had once shared. But it was a start. And for the first time since that punch bowl crashed over my head, I felt something other than despair. I felt determination. The next morning, I hired a lawyer. Not from my brother's network, though they offered several recommendations. I wanted someone who would be mine completely, with no divided loyalties. Dorothy Caldwell was 68 years old and looked like everyone's grandmother. Her office was cluttered with family photos and cat calendars. A cross-stitched pillow on her chair said "World's Best Grandma." When I first walked in, I wondered if the universe was playing some kind of joke on me. Then she started talking. "Your husband is smart," Dorothy said, reviewing the viral video on her laptop with the kind of clinical detachment that came from decades of experience. "He has been planning this for at least 2 years. How do you know the way he humiliated you publicly? That is not spontaneous. That is designed to establish a narrative. You are the unstable one. He is the victim." She looked up at me over her reading glasses. "Every piece of evidence he presents from now on will support that story. The question is, do you have anything that contradicts it?" I told her about my brother's investigators, about the financial irregularities Aiden had found years ago. Dorothy nodded slowly. "That is a start, but we need more. Hidden assets, proof of fraud, anything that shows Marcus Drake is not the upstanding businessman he pretends to be." "Sophie has been documenting his behavior for years," I offered. "And she has a recording, a phone call where Marcus admits to hiding money offshore." Dorothy's face went pale. "Tell me you have not shared that recording with anyone." "No, why? Because Illinois is a two-party consent state." Dorothy's voice was grim. "That recording is inadmissible. And if Marcus finds out it exists, he will use it to prove that you have been secretly recording him. Obsessed, unstable, stalking. The hope I had been nurturing flickered and died. So we cannot use it. We cannot use it in court. But it tells us something important." Dorothy leaned back in her chair. "Marcus has offshore accounts, hidden money. That means there is a paper trail somewhere. We just have to find it the legal way." "How?" "Forensic accountants, private investigators, and patience." She met my eyes. "This is not going to be quick, Mrs. Drake. Or easy. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my daughter growing bigger every day. I thought about the woman I wanted to be when she was old enough to ask questions about her father. "I am prepared," I said, "however long it takes." Her phone rang. She answered with a crisp yes, then listened for a moment. "Tell Mr. Drake's lawyer that I do not negotiate with con artists, and tell him if he calls again, I will file a harassment complaint." She hung up and smiled at me sweetly. Now, where were we? I think I was starting to like Dorothy Caldwell. 3 weeks into my divorce preparation, Marcus made his first major move. I was settling into a new routine. I had moved into a modest apartment that the brothers helped fund, but that I had chosen myself. Nothing fancy, just clean and safe and mine. I was doing remote legal work, rebuilding skills that had atrophied during 5 years of being Marcus's wife. I was seeing an obstetrician who did not report back to my husband. I was feeling for the first time in years like I might actually be okay. Then the custody motion arrived. If you have ever been through a custody battle, you know that feeling. The moment when you open an envelope and realize that someone is trying to take your child away from you. It is like being punched in the stomach and the heart at the same time. "He cannot do this," I said to Dorothy, my hands shaking as I read the document. "The baby is not even born yet. How can he file for custody of an unborn child?" "It is called a pre-birth custody order," Dorothy explained, her voice tight. "They are rare, but not unprecedented. And given what Marcus is claiming, the judge might actually consider it." "What is he claiming?" Dorothy hesitated. Then she handed me another document. It was a psychological evaluation, conducted by my therapist, Dr. Ellen Morrison, the woman I had trusted with my deepest fears and insecurities for the past 3 years. According to her report, I was mentally unstable, paranoid, prone to irrational outbursts, a potential danger to myself and others. "This is not true," I whispered. "None of this is true, I know." Dorothy's voice was gentle. But it gets worse. How can it possibly get worse? Dr. Ellen Morrison is Scarlett Hayes' aunt. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of Dorothy's desk to steady myself. My therapist was working for Marcus. This whole time. Every session, every confession, every moment of vulnerability. It was all being reported back to my husband. The betrayal hit me in waves. First shock, then disbelief, then a rage so pure it almost choked me. I had cried in that office. I had talked about my fears of being a bad mother because I lost my own mother so young. I had confessed that sometimes I wondered if Marcus really loved me. I had shared things I had never told another living soul, and she had written it all down and handed it to the man who was trying to destroy me. She knew my fears about not being a good mother, I said, my voice sounding far away to my own ears. She knew I worried about repeating the cycles of my own childhood. She knew everything, and Marcus used it all to build a case against you. Dorothy looked genuinely sorry. I have seen a lot of terrible things in 40 years of family law, Isabella, but this is one of the most calculated betrayals I have ever encountered. How do I fight this? I asked. How do I fight something built on my own words twisted against me? One step at a time, Dorothy said. We get our own psychological evaluation. We document everything, and we never, ever give up. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Dorothy prepared me as best she could, but we both knew we were fighting uphill. Marcus had documentation, expert testimony, a narrative that had been carefully constructed over years. All I had was the truth, and in family court, the truth did not always win. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Judge Patricia Coleman presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had seen everything and been fooled by nothing. At least, I hoped she had not been fooled. Marcus sat at the opposite table, looking every inch the concerned father. Navy suit, worried expression, wedding ring still on his finger, as if he was hoping for reconciliation. His lawyer was expensive and slick, the kind of man who smiled while he destroyed people. Scarlett was nowhere to be seen, probably coached to stay away to avoid complicating the optics. Marcus's lawyer spoke first, laying out a devastating case. The therapy records. Testimony from a former colleague who claimed I had been erratic at work. Financial records showing I had not worked during my marriage. Proof I could not support a child. Then came Marcus's testimony. I love Isabella, he said, managing to look genuinely pained. Even now, after everything, I still love her. But I am worried about her. The outburst at our anniversary party was just the latest in a pattern of unstable behavior. I want what is best for our child, and I do not believe Isabella is capable of providing that right now. He even squeezed out a single tear, one perfect, performative tear rolling down his cheek. I wanted to stand up and scream that he was lying, that he had planned the whole thing, that he had poured punch on me and laughed while I drowned. But Dorothy had warned me, stay calm, do not react. Any emotion you show will be used against you. So I sat there with my hands folded in my lap while my husband lied to a judge about who I was. He was good. So good that I could almost see Judge Coleman wavering. Dorothy did her best. She pointed out that therapy records were privileged and should not have been admitted. She noted that I had family support now. She challenged the narrative that I was unable to work when I had simply chosen to support my husband's career. But it was not enough. Mrs. Drake, Judge Coleman said, addressing me directly, the court has serious concerns about your psychological stability during this pregnancy. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting temporary custody of the unborn child to Mr. Drake. The words did not make sense at first. I could not process them. My brain kept rejecting them, like a computer refusing to accept an impossible command. What does that mean? I managed to ask. It means that when your child is born, Mr. Drake will have primary physical custody. You will be permitted supervised visitation pending a full psychological evaluation. The judge's voice was not unkind, but it was final. And Mrs. Drake, if the evaluation shows what I suspect it will show, we may need to discuss whether you should be present at the birth at all. I would need permission to attend the birth of my own daughter. The rest of the hearing passed in a blur. Dorothy guided me out of the courtroom, but I could barely see through the tears. In the hallway, I passed Marcus. He smiled at me, the same charming smile that had convinced me to marry him 5 years ago. I told you, he murmured, low enough that only I could hear. You should have just taken the punch and smiled. Now look what you have made me do. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to do something that would prove every terrible thing Dr. Morrison had written about me. Instead, I walked away, one foot in front of the other, head held high even though every part of me wanted to crumble. Out of the courthouse, into the sunlight, and straight into the arms of Sophie Bennett, who was waiting with a car and a plan. "We are not done," Sophie said fiercely. "This is just round one." But as I sat in her car, my hand pressed against my belly, where my daughter kicked and squirmed, and as if she was trying to comfort me, I wondered if she was right, or if Marcus had already won. To anyone watching this who has been through a custody battle, who has had your own words twisted against you, who has felt the system fail you, I want you to know something. This is not the end of my story, and it does not have to be the end of yours. I spent 3 days in something close to catatonia. I did not eat unless Sophie forced me. I did not sleep unless exhaustion dragged me under. I stared at the wall of my apartment and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. Have you ever felt that way? Like the world has become two-dimensional. Like you are watching your own life from somewhere far away. Like nothing matters anymore because the worst has already happened. That was me for 72 hours. Then on the fourth day, I made a decision. I was done being a victim. Done letting Marcus control the narrative. Done waiting for someone else to save me. Done crying into my pillow at 3 in the morning while my baby kicked inside me, wondering what kind of world I was bringing her into. I hired my own private investigator. Her name was Rita Vasquez, a former cop who had left the force after too many years of seeing justice fail. She was tough, direct, and completely unimpressed by Marcus Drake's reputation. When I walked into her office, she looked me up and down, took in my pregnant belly, my tired eyes, my determined expression. "You are the punch bowl wife," she said. It was not a question. "I am," I replied, "and I am going to destroy the man who did it to me." Rita smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had been waiting for exactly this kind of case. "Tell me everything," Rita said. "Every detail you can remember about his business, his travel, his behavior. Somewhere in there is the thread we need to pull." I talked for 3 hours about the trips to Miami that Marcus said were for work, about the phone calls he took in the other room, always stepping outside or closing the door, about the property management company that sent statements to our house once by accident before Marcus intercepted them. I remembered his face when he saw that envelope, the flash of panic before he smoothed it away. At the time, I had believed him when he said it was just a billing error. I had believed everything he told me. Rita listened, made notes, and then she smiled again. And this time there was something predatory in it. "Miami," she said. "That is where we start." 2 weeks later, I was on a flight to Florida. Economy class because I was saving every dollar. Pregnant enough now that the flight attendant gave me sympathetic looks and brought me extra pillows without asking. Rita had traced the property management company. It was registered to someone named Jay Cortez, an address in Coral Gables, a beautiful house with a red tile roof in bougainvillea climbing the walls. I sat in my rental car outside that house for 20 minutes. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. I almost did not knock, almost turned around and went back to the airport. What was I doing here? What did I expect to find? Some magical evidence that would fix everything? But I thought about my daughter, about the future we deserved, about the woman I was trying to become, about the mother I wanted to be. I knocked. The door opened to reveal a woman about my age. Dark hair, tired eyes, two small children peeking out from behind her legs. A boy who looked about 5. A girl who looked about 3. And the boy had Marcus's eyes, yes? She looked nervous, like she was expecting bad news, like she had been expecting bad news for years. "I am Isabella Drake," I said. "I think we need to talk about Marcus." Her face went white. Then she grabbed my arm, pulled me inside, and shut the door behind us. Her name was Jennifer Cortez, and she was Marcus's first wife. They had never divorced. I sat in her living room drinking tea that I could not taste, listening to a story that made my own betrayal seem almost mundane. "We got married 8 years ago," Jennifer said. Her voice was flat, rehearsed, like she had told this story to herself 1,000 times in the mirror. "I was 22 and stupid. He was charming and said all the right things, made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. By the time I realized what he really was, I had 2 kids and no way out. He threatened her, constantly. If she talked, he would take the children. If she exposed him, he would destroy her reputation. He had connections, lawyers, money. She had nothing but fear." "I tried to warn you," Jennifer said softly. "Before your wedding, I sent a letter to your office. My blood ran cold. I never got it. I figured." Jennifer looked at her children, who were playing quietly in the corner, building something with blocks. They had learned to be quiet. Children of abusers always learn to be quiet. "Marcus must have intercepted it. I wanted to save you, but I could not even save myself." "This is bigamy," I said slowly, the lawyer part of my brain finally kicking in. "He committed a federal crime by marrying me." "I know, but proving it means exposing myself, exposing my children." Jennifer's voice shook. "He has told me exactly what he will do if I ever testify against him. He said he would take Marcus Jr. and Emma, and I would never see them again. He said he would make sure no one believed me about anything." I looked at this woman, this mother who had been terrorized for 8 years, who had raised 2 children alone while their father built an empire on lies, who had watched from the shadows as he married another woman and started another family. "We are not enemies," I said. "We are both his victims." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I know, but what can we do? He has all the power, not all of it." I felt something shifting inside me, a new clarity, a new purpose. "We have something he does not expect. We have each other, and we have the truth." I left Miami with copies of Jennifer's marriage certificate, photos, records, proof of bigamy, proof that Marcus Drake was not just a cheater, but a criminal. And for the first time since that punch bowl crashed over my head, I thought I might actually win. The story broke on a Tuesday. I did not use Miles's media empire, though he offered, multiple times, very insistently. But I wanted this to be mine. I wanted to know that when the dust settled, I had been the one to bring Marcus down. Instead, I went to an investigative journalist who had been following Marcus's business dealings for years. A woman named Rebecca Torres, who had been waiting for exactly this kind of break. "Real estate mogul's secret double life." The headline ran across every platform. Photos of Jennifer, the marriage certificate, a timeline showing that Marcus had been committing bigamy for over 5 years. The public turned on him overnight. Comments flooded social media. How could he do this to 2 women? What kind of monster has a secret family? Justice for Isabella. Justice for Jennifer. I will admit something to you. Reading those comments felt good. After months of being called a gold digger, a drama queen, a woman who deserved what she got, finally people were seeing the truth. Finally people were on my side. If you have ever been publicly shamed and then publicly vindicated, you know that feeling. It does not fix everything. It does not heal the wounds. But it helps. God, it helps. Marcus's clients started calling lawyers. His business partners distanced themselves. His carefully constructed reputation was crumbling like a sandcastle in a hurricane. Dorothy filed an emergency motion to reverse the custody order. "New evidence," she argued. "Marcus Drake is not just a bad husband. He is a criminal." Jennifer agreed to testify via video for her safety. We had talked for hours about the risks. She was terrified, but she was also tired of hiding, tired of being afraid. She wanted her children to grow up knowing their mother was brave. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing. For 3 days, I slept better than I had in months. I ate real food. I let myself imagine a future where I raised my daughter without Marcus's shadow hanging over us. I even started looking at baby clothes, something I had been afraid to do before. Then Rita Vasquez called. "Jennifer is gone," she said. "Her house is empty. No forwarding address, forwarding address." She disappeared in the middle of the night. The phone almost slipped from my hand. What? It gets worse. Marcus's lawyer is filing a motion claiming Jennifer was paid to lie. They have bank records showing a large deposit in her account, supposedly from the Harrington family. That is not possible. My brothers would not. I know. Rita's voice was grim. But someone planted that money, and now the narrative is flipping. Rich family tries to destroy self-made man. Billionaire brothers orchestrate smear campaign against hardworking entrepreneur. I hung up the phone and sat in the darkness of my apartment. Marcus had anticipated this. Of course he had. He had been planning for every contingency while I stumbled from crisis to crisis, always one step behind, always reacting instead of acting, always playing his game by his rules. And now Jennifer was gone, the woman I had promised to protect, the woman who had trusted me when she had every reason not to trust anyone. I had failed her, just like I had failed everyone else. "Where are you, Jennifer?" I whispered into the darkness. "Are you safe? Are the kids okay?" No answer, just silence in the weight of another broken promise. The baby kicked, hard and insistent, a reminder that there was still something worth fighting for. Someone who needed me to keep going even when every instinct screamed to give up. "Okay," I whispered, my hand on my belly. "Okay, we are not done yet. Mommy is not giving up." My daughter was born 6 weeks later, Charlotte Rose. 6 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes. A shock of dark hair, perfect in every way, and taken from my arms 2 hours after delivery. I need you to understand something. Nothing I write can capture what that moment felt like. Holding your newborn daughter, smelling that sweet baby smell, feeling her tiny hand wrap around your finger, and then watching someone take her away. Marcus had primary custody. That was what the court order said. I was allowed supervised visitation, 1 hour a day, watched by a social worker who documented my every word and expression. The hardest thing I have ever done is hand my newborn daughter to the man who destroyed my life. "She is so beautiful," Marcus said, cradling Charlotte with what looked like genuine tenderness. He was playing the role of devoted father, and he was playing it perfectly. "I will take such good care of her, and maybe someday, if you get the help you need, you can be part of her life again." I wanted to kill him. The urge was so strong that I had to physically step back to keep from acting on it. My hands clenched into fists. My vision went red. Every cell in my body screamed to fight, to scratch, to bite, to do whatever it took to get my daughter back. But the social worker was watching. The nurses were watching. Any sign of aggression would be documented, used against me. So instead, I turned and walked out of that hospital room with my head held high and my heart shattered into a million pieces. Sophie was waiting in the hallway. She caught me before I collapsed. "This is not over," she said fiercely. "We will get her back. I promise you, Isabella, we will get her back." "How?" I could barely speak through the tears. "He has won. He has won everything, not everything." Sophie helped me to a chair. "You are still here. You are still fighting. And I have been doing some research while you were in labor." She told me about a forensic accountant who specialized in finding hidden assets, about a new investigative technique that could trace offshore money through cryptocurrency exchanges, about a support group for survivors of narcissistic abuse who might be able to testify about patterns of behavior. "It is not over," Sophie said again. "It is just beginning." And Marcus made a mistake. "What mistake?" "He thinks you are broken." Sophie's eyes were fierce. "He thinks taking Charlotte destroyed you. But he does not know you like I do. He does not know that Harrington women do not break. They bend, and then they snap back and take out everyone in their path." I looked at my friend, my loyal, stubborn, impossible friend who had never given up on me even when I had given up on myself. "Okay," I said. "Tell me everything." The next 2 months were a special kind of hell. I spent 1 hour a day with Charlotte, watched by a supervisor who noted everything. Isabella seemed tense today. Isabella had difficulty maintaining eye contact. Isabella appeared emotional when the baby cried. Of course I was emotional. She was my daughter. I had carried her for 9 months, given birth to her alone in a hospital room, while her father's lawyers waited outside with custody papers. And now I could only hold her for 60 minutes a day while a stranger judged my every movement. If you have ever had someone evaluate your love for your own child, you know what I am talking about. The way you second-guess every smile, every touch, every word. The way you perform motherhood instead of just being a mother. the way 60 minutes feels like both an eternity and a single heartbeat. I would count down the hours until my visit. Then I would count down the minutes during the visit, dreading the moment when the supervisor would clear her throat and say time is up. And every single time, handing Charlotte back felt like ripping off a piece of my soul. Marcus played his role perfectly. The concerned father, the reasonable ex-husband. He never yelled, never threatened, never did anything that could be documented as abusive. He did not need to. The system was doing his work for him. The system that was supposed to protect children was being used as a weapon against me. And there was nothing I could do about it. Meanwhile, Sophie and I worked every angle we could think of. The forensic accountant found evidence of hidden accounts, but nothing we could prove in court. Rita traced connections to shell companies, but the paper trail went cold in the Cayman Islands. The support group provided valuable emotional support, but their testimony about narcissistic abuse patterns was not enough to override Dr. Morrison's official psychological evaluation. We were so close, and so impossibly far. Then, on a Thursday night in late October, everything fell apart at once. Sophie had been gathering evidence at Marcus's office. She had bribed a janitor for access after hours, searching for documents that might prove what the forensic accountant suspected. I told her not to go. I told her it was too dangerous. But Sophie being Sophie, she went anyway. I will be fine, she had said. What is the worst that could happen? She found them. Flash drives containing records of offshore transactions. Proof of the hidden $47 million. And then she fell down the stairs, or was pushed. The investigation would never prove which. But I knew. I knew in my bones what had really happened. I got the call at 2 in the morning. The phone rang, and I knew before I even answered. You know that feeling? When the phone rings at the wrong hour, and your whole body goes cold because you already know it is bad news? Sophie Bennett was in the ICU with a broken back and internal bleeding. She was in a medically induced coma. The doctors did not know if she would ever walk again. The documents she had found were gone. I drove to the hospital in a daze. I do not remember the drive. I do not remember parking. I just remember walking through those sliding doors and smelling that hospital smell and knowing that my best friend might die because of me. I sat in the hospital waiting room, numb with shock and guilt. Sophie's parents were there, holding each other and crying. Her mother looked at me when I walked in, and for a moment I thought she was going to scream at me. Tell me this was my fault. Tell me I had killed her daughter. Instead, she hugged me. She loves you like a sister, Sophie's mother whispered. She would do anything for you. She knew the risks. That made it worse, so much worse. They did not blame me. They said they did not blame me, but I blamed myself. I would blame myself for the rest of my life. I should have used my brother's investigators. I should have let them handle this with their resources and security. Instead, I had let my friend risk her life because I was too proud to accept help. Pride. That stupid, stubborn Harrington pride. It might have cost Sophie her life. While I sat there, my phone buzzed. An alert from my cloud storage. I opened the app to find that every document, every photo, every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past 8 months had been deleted. Wiped clean, 8 months of work. Gone in seconds. My laptop was stolen from my car the same night. The backup hard drive at my apartment was destroyed in an electrical fire that the fire department ruled accidental. But nothing about Marcus Drake was accidental. I knew that now. He was not just fighting me in court anymore. He was systematically erasing every trace of evidence against him, and he was willing to hurt people to do it, willing to put my best friend in a coma, willing to destroy anything and anyone who stood in his way. For the first time, I felt genuine fear, not just for myself, for Charlotte, for my brothers, for anyone who tried to help me. The arrest came 3 days later. They showed up at 3 in the morning, pounding on my apartment door, the kind of pounding that makes your heart stop. Police, open up. 2 officers with a warrant and apologetic expressions stood in my doorway. Mrs. Drake, you are under arrest for attempted parental kidnapping and making terroristic threats. What? I could barely process the words. I have not done anything. Ma'am, we need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. But they had documentation, phone records showing a call to my therapist where I allegedly threatened to take Charlotte and flee the country. Plans found on my computer, which Marcus's people had conveniently accessed before destroying it, detailing how to disappear with Adram. All fabricated, all planted, and all completely convincing to the exhausted officers who were just doing their jobs. The handcuffs were cold. That is what I remember most. How cold they were against my wrists. I had one phone call from the holding cell. I did not call Dorothy, did not call Rita, did not even call Sophie's number on the desperate chance she might have woken up. I called Aiden. He answered on the first ring like he had been waiting for 8 months. I know, he said before I could speak. We are coming. I am sorry. The words came out broken. I thought I could do this alone. You did do it alone. Aiden's voice was calm and steady. For 8 months, you fought a monster with your bare hands. You found his weaknesses. You mapped his strategies. You know more about Marcus Drake than anyone alive. And I failed. I lost everything. No, you got knocked down. There was a difference. There was something new in my brother's voice. Something that sounded almost like pride. Now, Bella, you are ready to let us help you win. I spent 48 hours in that holding cell. They were the longest hours of my life. I thought about Charlotte, about whether she would remember me, about whether Marcus would tell her I was crazy, dangerous, unfit to be her mother. I thought about Sophie, lying in that hospital bed, fighting for her life. I thought about Jennifer, hiding somewhere with her children, too afraid to come forward. I thought about all the women Marcus had destroyed, and I made a decision. No more. No more doing this alone. No more pride. No more pretending I did not need help. Marcus Drake was going down. And I was going to use every resource at my disposal to make it happen. But when I walked out of that holding cell, I was not prepared for what was waiting. My brothers were there, all three of them. Aiden with the lawyers, Grayson with the financial records, Miles with a media strategy that would turn the tide of public opinion. And behind them, a surprise I never expected. Scarlett Hayes stood in the parking lot of the police station, looking like she had not slept in days. Her perfect makeup was gone. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. She looked like a woman whose entire world had collapsed. We need to talk, she said, because I just found out that everything I believed about Marcus Drake was a lie. We gathered at the Harrington family home for the first time in 5 years. I walked through rooms filled with memories. The kitchen where Aiden had taught me to cook after our parents died. Burning pancakes until we finally got them right. The library where Grayson had helped me with homework, patient even when I cried over algebra. The garden where Miles had chased me during hide and seek when I was small enough to fit behind the rose bushes. This house had been my refuge once, the only place in the world where I felt completely safe, and I had thrown it away for a man who had never loved me. Coming back felt like stepping into a time machine. The same furniture, the same photographs, the same smell of wood polish and old books that had always meant home to me. But my brothers had kept it exactly as I remembered. My old bedroom was still there, dusty but unchanged. My childhood stuffed animals still sat on the bed. Photos of our family still lined the hallways. They had never given up on me coming home. I stood in the doorway of my old room and cried. Aiden found me there. We always knew you would come back, he said quietly. We just did not know it would take this long. In the war room, which was really just the dining room with laptops and documents spread across the antique table, we planned our counterattack. Scarlett went first. I did not know about Jennifer, she said. I did not know about the kids in Miami, I thought. She stopped, swallowed hard. I thought I was special. I thought Marcus was going to leave you for me. I thought he loved me. You poured punch on a pregnant woman, I said flatly, in front of 1,000 people. I know, and I will hate myself for that until the day I die. Scarlett met my eyes, and I saw genuine remorse there. Not just regret at getting caught, actual shame. But I am not here to ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I am here because I found out something that changes everything. She pulled out her phone, showing us photos of documents. There is another woman in Seattle. Her name is Amanda. She is also pregnant. She also thinks Marcus is going to marry her. I felt sick. How many women had Marcus manipulated? How many lives had he destroyed while building his empire of lies? 4 women, at least 4 women who thought they were the love of his life. 4 women carrying his children or raising his children. 4 women whose lives he had systematically destroyed. And there is more, Scarlett continued. I helped him hide money. She looked ashamed. He told me it was just tax planning, legal strategies to minimize his tax burden. I believed him because I am an idiot with a law degree who should have known better. But I know where the accounts are. I know how to prove he has been committing fraud. Why are you telling us this? Grayson asked suspiciously. What is in it for you? Because I am pregnant too. Scarlett's hand went to her belly, and I noticed for the first time the slight swell beneath her blouse. And when my child asks me someday who their father is, I want to be able to tell them that I helped bring him to justice. Not that I helped him escape. Not that I stood by while he destroyed more lives. I studied the woman who had humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. She looked different now. Smaller, more human. Not the confident mistress who had laughed while punch dripped down my face, but a scared woman who had finally realized she was just another victim in Marcus Drake's long line of victims. I thought about what Sophie would say. Sophie, who was still in that hospital bed, still fighting to survive. Sophie would tell me that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Sophie would tell me that forgiveness was not about letting someone off the hook. It was about freeing yourself. I forgive you, I said. The words surprised me as much as they surprised Scarlett. Her composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. I do not deserve it, but thank you. It was not absolution. There would be consequences for what she had done. But it was a start, and sometimes a start is all you need. There is one more piece, Aiden said, steering us back to business. Marcus's mother, Diane Drake. She hates me. I remembered holidays at her house, her thin-lipped disapproval, her pointed comments about my family not being good enough for her precious son. She does not hate you. She is afraid of Marcus. Grayson pulled up more documents. And we have reason to believe she has been keeping records, an insurance policy, every fraud, every victim, every lie. She has documented all of it for the past 20 years. Why would she do that? Because Marcus learned to be a monster from someone. Aiden's voice was grim. His father was the same way. Charming on the outside, cruel underneath. Diane survived 30 years of marriage to that man. She learned that the only way to protect yourself from a monster is to have leverage. And even monsters protect themselves, Miles added. The visit to Diane Drake's nursing home was one of the strangest experiences of my life. She was only 65, but Marcus had put her there anyway. Too frail to live alone, he claimed. In reality, it was a way to control her, to keep her quiet and compliant, to make sure she could never use that leverage she had spent years collecting. I brought Aiden with me for support. When Diane saw us walk in, her face went through a complicated series of expressions: fear, recognition, confusion, and something that might have been hope. Mrs. Drake, Aiden's voice was formal. We need to discuss your son. My son is a good man, Diane said automatically. The words sounded rehearsed, like she had been saying them for so long she did not even hear them anymore. Your son has 3 pregnant women who all believe he is going to marry them, I said. He committed bigamy. He has stolen millions, and he put my best friend in the hospital. She might never walk again. Diane flinched at the mention of Sophie. Her hands trembled in her lap. We know you have documentation, Aiden continued, records of everything Marcus has done. We know you kept them as insurance. I do not know what you are talking about. I leaned forward, keeping my voice gentle. He called you useless. Scarlett told me, in front of her. He was planning to move you to a state facility, something even worse than this, a place where you would be forgotten. Diane's face crumpled. I know what it is like to be trapped by someone who claims to love you, I said softly. I know what it is like to be afraid every single day, to walk on eggshells, to perform happiness while dying inside. But you do not have to be afraid anymore. If you help us, we will protect you. Protect me? Diane laughed bitterly. No one can protect me from Marcus. He always wins. He always finds a way. We can, Aiden said firmly. The Harrington family has resources that Marcus cannot match. Security, safe houses, legal protection. We can move you somewhere he will never find you, somewhere you can finally be free. All we need is the truth." The silence stretched for a long moment. I watched Diane's face, watching her fight the battle between fear and hope, between the woman Marcus had trained her to be and the woman she might have been without him. Finally, she spoke. He was such a sweet boy. Tears streamed down her face. Before his father ruined him, before I helped ruin him by staying silent, by pretending everything was normal, by teaching him that this was how marriages worked, I thought if I had proof, he could not hurt me. But you are right, he is never going to stop hurting people. Not unless someone stops him. She reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out a key. "Safety deposit box," she said. "First National Bank, downtown branch. Everything is there. 20 years of evidence. Every scheme, every fraud, every victim carefully documented." I took the key with trembling hands. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you keep all of this?" "Because I always hoped someone would be brave enough to use it." Diane looked at me with something like admiration. "I was never that brave." "But you are." Inside that safety deposit box were flash drives, documents, photographs, 20 years of evidence. Every scheme, every fraud, every victim carefully documented in Diane's neat handwriting, including the wire transfer that paid Dr. Morrison to betray me, including the orders that sent someone to push Sophie down those stairs, including the threats to Jennifer that made her disappear with her children, including the names of every offshore account, every shell company, every hidden dollar. We finally had everything we needed. The trial of Marcus Drake was the biggest story in Chicago for 3 months. Criminal charges, bigamy, wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy to commit assault, witness tampering. The list went on and on. I testified on a Tuesday in March. The courtroom was packed. Media filled every available seat. Marcus sat at the defense table looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Without his expensive suits and confident smile, he was just a man. A pathetic, ordinary man who had built his entire life on lies. His lawyer tried to rattle me. "Is it not true that you refused help from your wealthy family?" "Yes," I said, "because I wanted to prove I could stand on my own." "And is it not true that you have been diagnosed with mental instability?" "I was gaslit by a man I trusted and betrayed by a therapist he paid to destroy me. Anyone would struggle under those circumstances." "And is it not true that—" "No," I interrupted him. "Let me tell you what is true." The courtroom went silent. Marcus Drake married me while he was still married to another woman. He isolated me from my family. He controlled my finances. He made me believe I was worthless. When I finally saw the truth, he tried to take my daughter. He put my best friend in the hospital. He fabricated evidence to have me arrested. I looked directly at Marcus. "You thought I was weak. You thought you had broken me. But you made a mistake. You forgot that I am a Harrington, and Harringtons do not stay down." The verdict came 3 weeks later. Guilty on all counts. Marcus Drake was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. I watched them lead him away in handcuffs, and I waited to feel triumph. Victory, satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired and relieved and ready to move on. The custody hearing was almost anticlimactic after everything else. Judge Coleman reviewed the new evidence, the criminal conviction, the fabricated psychological evaluation, the documented pattern of abuse and manipulation. Full custody to the mother, she ruled. And Mr. Dunware, Drake will have no visitation rights until his release, at which point the matter may be revisited. I held Charlotte in my arms as we walked out of that courtroom. She was 8 months old now, and she smiled at me with the trusting smile of a baby who did not understand how close she had come to losing her mother forever. There was one more surprise waiting outside. Scarlett Hayes stood on the courthouse steps with her newborn son in her arms. She looked nervous, uncertain, like she expected me to walk right past her. Instead, I stopped. "Our children are siblings," I said. "They deserve to know each other." Scarlett's eyes filled with tears. "I would like that, if you can stand to have me around." I thought about everything she had done. The humiliation, the betrayal, the punch bowl. I also thought about everything she had sacrificed to help bring Marcus down. The career she had lost, the reputation she had destroyed, the courage it had taken to testify against a man who had fooled her just as thoroughly as he had fooled me. "We are not going to let him divide us," I said. "Not even from prison. Our children deserve better than to grow up with his poison between them." Scarlett nodded, too emotional to speak. "We would never be best friends. There was too much history for that. But we could be co-parents, allies. Two women who had survived the same monster and built something new from the wreckage." 1 year later, I stood in the garden of my new apartment, watching Charlotte take her first steps toward me across the grass. She was beautiful, curious and stubborn and perfect in every way. She had my eyes and my mother's smile, and nothing of Marcus except the DNA she would never be defined by. My brothers were there, of course, Aiden teaching her to catch a ball she was too young to catch, Grayson reading her a board book about numbers, Miles documenting everything on his phone because he was incapable of being present without recording it. Sophie was there too, in a wheelchair she was slowly learning to leave behind. She was walking again, the doctor said. It would take time and therapy, but she would walk. She had almost died for me. I still had nightmares about it, but when I tried to apologize, she just laughed. "I have been waiting my whole life for an adventure," she said. This was definitely that. Jennifer Cortez sent a video message from her new life in witness protection. Her children were thriving. She was going back to school. For the first time in 8 years, she was not afraid. Even Diane Drake was doing better. We had moved her to a real care facility, one where she was treated with dignity rather than controlled. She would never fully escape the guilt of enabling her son, but she was trying to make amends. I thought about who I had been 2 years ago. A woman who thought love meant losing yourself. A woman who believed independence meant isolation. A woman who had traded her new family for a man who had never deserved her. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who had been broken and rebuilt herself piece by piece. Charlotte reached me, grabbing my legs for balance. She looked up at me with those big eyes, and I saw my whole future reflected in them. "You are going to be so strong, baby girl," I whispered. "And you are going to know that you never have to choose between love and yourself. You can have both." I lifted her into my arms, holding her close, breathing in the sweet baby smell of her hair. The punch bowl had been meant to destroy me. Instead, it had washed away everything that was not essential. The pretense, the pride, the desperate need to prove something to people who already loved me unconditionally. What remained was this: family, real family, the kind that waited 5 years without complaint, the kind that respected your choices even when they disagreed, the kind that showed up when the world turned against you and never once said, "I told you so." Aiden appeared at my elbow, watching Charlotte with the soft expression he only wore around her. "She is going to be a handful," he said. "I can already tell. She's a Harrington." I smiled. "We are all handfuls." We stood there together, watching the sunset paint the garden in golden rose. Somewhere, Marcus Drake was sitting in a prison cell, finally facing consequences for a lifetime of cruelty. But I barely thought about him anymore. He had taken years of my life. He had nearly taken my daughter, my freedom, my sanity. He had not taken my future. That belonged to me now, to Charlotte, to the family I had almost lost, and the new family I had built from the ruins. If you are in a relationship that makes you feel small, remember this: the prison is not the relationship. The prison is believing you deserve it. You do not. You never did. And it is never too late to walk towards something better. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and tell me. Did you ever think you could not leave a bad situation? And then you did? I want to hear your story, and that is where our story ends. But I have a question for you. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments. I love seeing how far this story has traveled. And while you are down there, tell me this. Have you ever been in a situation where everyone counted you out, but you proved them wrong? Have you ever walked away from someone who tried to break you and built something beautiful from the wreckage? I want to hear your story, because every single one of you watching this has survived something, and your story matters. If this video made you feel something, if it made you angry or hopeful, or reminded you of your own strength, do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It takes 1 second, but it helps this story reach other women who need to hear it. And if you are new here, consider subscribing and turning on that notification bell. We share powerful stories like this every single week. Stories about women who refuse to stay down. Stories about karma coming for people who deserve it. Stories that remind you that you are stronger than you think. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, the prison is not the relationship. The prison is believing you deserve it. You do not. You never did. See you in the next one.